I will make it public right here that he will get the next shot at the title.
Have you ever heard of cage fighting?
Like dog cage fighting?
No, with martial arts.
Oh, no.
No?
No. Like UFC?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I like the UFC.
Oh, you...
This fight, everybody knew coming in, was basically your #1 contender bout. At least that's what Zuffa was saying, that if you win this fight, you fight Rich Franklin in November.
Always liked the Gracies and their style of fighting.
Have you ever heard of Matt Lindland?
Matt who?
Lindland.
No, I haven't. Is he one of the new up-and-comers?
What happens now if for some reason you don't get the title shot? Are you so frustrated with your UFC and everything, you're just, going to look for another option? Or what if that was scenario played out?
The one looking like the idiot right now is the UFC, because they've got one of the best fighters in the world that they cut loose, and he, they haven't brought him in to fight their top guys.
The scenario is I don't get a title shot. I have another fight on this contract with the UFC.
From Eagle Creek, USA, Matt the Law Lindland!
Get that back tenfold. I've learned how hard you have to work to be successful. I've learned how much you have to sacrifice and how dedicated you have to be successful. I mean, it doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come automatically. It takes effort, and if you want to be successful in anything, in wrestling, in sports, or in business, in life, you've got to give your best. You've got to strive for excellence. You've got to give everything you've got for whatever amount of time it is that you're going for your goals.
Well, Matt was a little different. He'd like to do things different than everybody else. He was an individualist. He did everything his way. Matt got a horse. Well, he's only a year and a half old when he got his first horse. We bought the horse before we even moved out here. I got the horse a few months ahead of time. Matt got into wrestling. Started just in grade school a little bit. Made the varsity the first year. Junior nationals. Won first at district. Took second place at state. He played baseball one year after he got caught in school chewing tobacco. So they told him that he had to do an alternative sport. And so baseball is basically the only thing left that he could do at that time of the year. So he played baseball. He wasn't very good at it. Coach told him to keep your eye on the ball. So they put him out in the back, out in the field. And ball's coming at him. He's watching the ball, and it hit him in the eye and knocked him out. Coach asked him, why didn't put your glove up and catch the ball? He said, you didn't tell me to. Told me to keep my eye on the ball.
Actually, I dated one of his friends, and I got introduced to him, and he would not leave me alone. I was a junior, so I was 16. He was a year older. Or no, maybe we were sophomore. I was a sophomore, he was a junior. And he was like 98 pounds. Well, we just honestly, me and my mom used to joke, because he was the guy that would never leave our house. And he was going out to Nebraska for school, and he wanted me to go with him. And he showed up with a U-Haul, and I didn't have anything packed, so he just started putting everything in my closet in the truck, and away we went. And actually, the day we got married, he picked me up from the machine shop, the place I worked, and took me to the Justice of the Peace, and we got married. But I mean, ever since I met Matt, all I wanted was a family, kids. Wants to be the dad.
Robin, do you want to be in the movies? What'd you say? Do you love your daddy? Huh?
Yes.
Yes. Say, I love you, Daddy.
We went to Colorado Springs for him to train for the Olympics. He didn't make the '96 team. We went back to Nebraska where he coached.
When I think about, my goals of being a champion, I see myself up on that stand and getting my hand raised and getting that medal put around my neck. I think about, being up on that stand on the top of the podium and hearing that national anthem. oh, it gets, you know, it just makes my heart warm.
He'd lock up with a guy and he could throw him, and I've never seen anybody that locks up as tight as he does and throws a guy.
Ever since the day I met him, he was talking about this medal that he was going to win.
You know, he was a guy that came out of high school and never won a high school state championship. He instantly says, I'm going to win a national championship.
And it usually takes guys years and years and years to get to a place where, okay, now I'm on in contention for the world team. Okay, now I'm into the Olympic trials. You could get into the Olympic trials and never make it past there.
Well, for a guy to think he can win a national championship when he never won a high school championship is logically hard to wrap your brain around.
Matt and I go way back. We first met when we were in college. He was wrestling in Nebraska. I wrestled at the Nemesis, Oklahoma State. And my teammate was Pat Smith. And him and Matt went back and forth quite a bit.
Well, a few years goes by. Next thing you know, he won 3 national championships.
And then later we ended up on the national team together and went on, you know, every crazy country in Eastern Bloc Europe and several big world championships and world teams together, and we got to know each other pretty well through that endeavor.
Matt's wrestling background, I knew that he was a strong wrestler. I didn't know the whole details of how decorated of a wrestler he was.
When I'm out there wrestling, it's not just Matt Lindland wrestling, it's Matt Lindland wrestling for the United States, him wrestling for his family, his community, you know, everything. I mean, I love this country, and I mean, one of my favorite things to do is when I'm competing is I'm proud to wear that singlet that says USA on it. To be able to represent the United States is really what it comes down to, and that's why I'm doing it. I mean, I'm doing it for me, but I'm doing it so I can represent this country.
His confidence it's unbelievable, but if you believe in the laws of attraction at all, if you've ever read The Secret, I mean, he's just a walking example of it. Then he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to win the Olympics. And the next thing you know, he doesn't even make the Olympic team. He loses at the trials.
A bad call by a referee actually almost cost Lindland a trip to the Olympics. He had to wait 2 months and watch his case go to the Supreme Court before learning he could represent the United States in Sydney.
You know, you talk about him suing the U.S. Olympic Committee to make the Olympics because he felt that he was wronged. Who does that? You know, and who does it successfully?
Sure enough, he gets put back on the team and he finds himself in the finals of the Olympics.
Matt Lindland came to Sydney not to be just part of the United States Olympic Greco wrestling team, but to win a medal, and tonight that medal is silver after a tremendous tournament, not the match that you won tonight against Kardonov. But Matt, all in all, a very, very successful, the most successful tournament of your career, yes?
I won other tournaments, so I don't think so. It's a big tournament, though, and to take a silver medal is a good place. I came here to win, but, you know, I think, you know, I should be proud of what I've accomplished.
Yes, you should.
I'm happy.
You never wavered in your belief of yourself, even when the arbitration hearings were going on. You always believed that you belonged here, and I think you certainly proved it in Sydney during the last couple of days.
I hope so. What I'm going to take from wrestling is what I put into it. I put in a lot of work and a lot of time and effort, and I'm going to get that out of it. I'm going to get that back tenfold. I've learned how hard you have to work to be successful.
Who goes to the Supreme Court and you know, does all that? That's Matt Lindland, someone who's not willing to lay down for anybody, whether that's in the ring or outside of it.
When a lot of mixed martial arts fans say, oh, he's a wrestler and he's done this and that, I mean, you really got to look at the level where this wrestler is. As an Olympian, a silver medalist, number 2, you know, for that year, pretty much any guy that gets into the cage with the Matt Lindland is going to have a hard time. Matt Lindland will probably be able to control the bout because wrestlers get to decide where the fight goes.
And News Channel 8's John Becker has our report.
We all call him Daddy.
The flight delay gives one toddler a chance to practice some Olympic moves. Friends ready a welcome sign, and the wait gives family members a chance to talk about Greco-Roman wrestler Matt Lindland. The crowd preparing to greet Matt's plane came to see a man they know as a great dad and a good friend who just also happens to be an Olympian.
Even more so than his medal, I love the person that Matthew is.
After sharing a few hugs and showing off his new hardware, Matt says he's happy to be home, but can't help thinking about making one more Olympic trip.
And I'm so proud of him.
Maybe 4 years from now, I'll go get to the other color.
You know, I met Matt Lindland in 1996. I graduated from high school in North Platte, Nebraska, and then I decided to go wrestle at the University of Nebraska, where he was. Matt was an assistant coach there. You know, I ended up in Oregon based on Matt Lindland. You know, my fight career started through a friend. He just entered me in a fight over the internet, and then me and Matt started talking. That was in April of 2003. I just did a fight. I wasn't training or nothing. I just showed up and fought somebody. And then Matt knew me from college, obviously, and was like, "Are you fighting?" And I said, "Nah, well, I did one." And he's like, "I want you to move to Oregon." So I met him up in Colorado Springs. We talked a little bit about what he was going to do, how he's going to help me to come out here. He's like, "You can live at my house for a while till you get on your feet." And I said, "Well, let me talk it over, you know," and went back home, quit my job, and moved out here in June.
You know, work ethic, I mean, forget about it. The guy was an animal in the gym, and a lot of times we teased him because he would always be the last one picked at practice. Nobody wanted to wrestle with him. He's all bones and sinew and, you know, awkward, and he just beat the hell out of you when you wrestled with him. So he was like, "Damn it, I didn't get a partner again for a drill." He was always complaining about that. But
You all right? Yep.
I'm Matt's lawyer and his manager. I got to know Matt when he was trying to get on the Olympic team in the year 2000. And we had a case that we took through 2 arbitrations and 3 federal court appeals and ended up on the steps of the Supreme Court before they decided that Matt was going to the Olympics. Won his silver medal, and we've known each other ever since.
I told Matt to get in a fight, and he said after the Olympics that he would, and he followed through on it. After the 2000 Olympics, he transferred right into mixed martial arts. At that same time, I was just finishing up my wrestling career at the University of Oregon, so we started training mixed martial arts together the same way as we did wrestling. Just every day we get together and try to work on mixed martial arts.
If you want to be the best, you have to be willing to fight anyone. I mean, if you look at the fighters that stand out in our sport, Matt Lindland, BJ Penn, they'll fight anyone. 2 weight classes up, 1 weight class up, and I want to be one of the best as well someday. And so, got all the great examples here to look up to. Matt and Dan, they'll fight anyone.
Exactly. That's the move. Did you see that on tape?
Have you ever heard of cage fighting?
Cage fighting, yes.
Have you?
Yes. Is that the gladiator fighting? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I've never heard of cage fighting.
Is it to the death or just till one goes to the hospital?
I think it's a pretty killer sport.
Oh, the fact that people actually beat the shit out of each other instead of, like with wrestling where it's all fake and a bunch of staged stuff.
I'm against violence.
Just 2 guys, man on man, I like the fact that they have a lot of different skills they use, the submission holds and things like that. But it's, a lot of times they get on the ground and grapple, but then they'll get up and they'll start, punching and things. So
you've heard of cage fighting?
Oh. Yeah.
What is it?
I'm not so sure what it is, but I've heard of it. Do you like fighting in a cage?
I like it because it's really a mix of all the martial arts, and it's really interesting to me to when it boils right down to it. Out of all the martial arts, it seems like the grappling arts, whether it's wrestling, Roman Greco, or judo, jiu-jitsu, seems to be the dominant.
I don't know what I'm watching. I just when I'm flipping through and it comes on, I'll stay. That sort of thing. I don't know. UFC is probably like the first name that pops into head for as far as brawling.
In 1993, the first UFC was held in McNichols Arena in Denver, Colorado, and it was really basically to settle the question, who would win in all these various fighting styles, which fighting style was the best, and you had fighters who came in and they represented one individual unique style. Royce Gracie represented the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and people looked at him and they thought, how can this guy possibly compete with some of these athletes we have in this? He was a 175-pounder, he was skinny, but he understood jiu-jitsu, he knew things that they had never seen before, and he won the first UFC.
There were no weight classes, so you see guys with ponytails just getting banged on, and you see guys getting punched in the throat and kicked in the groin, and you see really no rules. It's basically a barroom brawl, the equivalent of basically the movie Fight Club.
I mean, we were the biggest thing there was on pay-per-view. We were doing 300,000 buys when there were 20 million homes. There's now 65, 67 million homes. There's now 3 times as many homes. And they rarely get up to those kind of numbers. We were doing it then. We would, I think we were on a great growth path. We had great fighters. It was an incredible time. It really was. Where people really wanted to see it, really believed in it. And very, very exciting time. And certainly if it hadn't become a silly political issue, there's no question it would have been a huge, huge sport. It was already.
There was a time when we refer to it as the Dark Ages, when the politicians started to take notice of this and they got kicked off of pay-per-view.
Few knew about the sport because it was banned in nearly every state, called too violent by some, including one of the most powerful lawmakers in Washington, Senator John McCain.
I think it's an incredibly brutal spectacle that is on the level of a cockfight, only we're using human beings.
But the hardcore fans, and there are a lot of them, they kept the sport alive on the internet during the dark period. And, 96 and 97, when there was no cable television, no Spike TV, no nothing. The internet really was the reason that mixed martial arts survived.
UFC was, an inch from dying.
Because we had been banned from cable for absolutely no reason, and please feel free to check it. There was never anything that happened, but we had this political problem, and we were losing quite a bit of money, and I was just financing it all out of my pocket.
It's one of those sports that was underground for so many years and was only watched and written about and talked about by a small cadre of people who collected on the internet.
Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta are casino owners in Las Vegas. Their family has a tradition in Las Vegas of being in the gaming industry. I think they own the Station properties, which are local Las Vegas casinos. They cater to Las Vegas audience. They have a lot of money. You're talking about casino owners. That's sort of synonymous.
But the Fertittas got really excited about the sport of MMA. They decided they wanted to take a look at buying the UFC.
It was a great buy. The UFC really was nothing at that point except a name, a name that people sort of remembered from a decade before. And they came along because, their buddy Dana White said, look, this is a great opportunity, let's purchase it.
Zuffa LLC had bought the UFC in early 2001, around UFC 30. And they spent the next 3 to 4 years pumping money into it, trying ad campaigns in big magazines, trying to get celebrities to come in. They were doing everything they could, and they were trying to get live fights onto any sports channel or specialty channel that they could, and they couldn't get it on.
Zuffa was the company that was created by the Fertittas and Dana White upon purchasing the UFC. It's basically the promotional company that handles all their mixed martial arts business.
At that time, Lorenzo was part of the boxing commission in the state of Nevada. A very respected commissioner, knew the sport, knew boxing.
They felt that they, could control the message in a way that the mainstream media would buy it. And their press packets for the longest time have said, we created mixed martial arts in North America. We were the ones behind the regulations in North America. We created the rules for New Jersey and California. All that's nonsense. There had been people long before Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta and Zuffa who would come along and put their heart and sweat and love for mixed martial arts into this thing. But Zuffa had gone around and convinced everybody that way. And you had major papers, major Time, Newsweek, Washington Post, New York Times, everybody and anybody that's the pillar of journalism in America saying that these guys created the rules. It's just nonsense.
Not that I ever doubted he'd be successful at it, but I just don't see that part of Matt. I thought that maybe he would decide he didn't like it, or maybe it was a little too brutal for him, he wouldn't like it, but I was wrong. We were in Colorado Springs, and my grandfather was dying, and we had no money to send me home, and so he went to work out, and he said he had something to do afterwards, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. And so it was late. I mean, I was worried about him. I was just panicked. And he comes home, and I'm like, what have you been doing? And he handed me, I think it was $1,000 cash, and he said, go see your grandfather. And I said, how did you get this money? I mean, seriously, I was thinking of all these things, like he robbed a bank, you know? And he said that he was in this tough man fight. I'm like, what is that? I mean, I had no idea what MMA was. I mean, I just could not believe that that's what he did. And then when I saw the video, which you have to see, it was hilarious. I could not believe that he had done that.
He genuinely enjoys the competition. I can remember a fight that Matt had, and Matt was broke. And I mean, I put Matt's poor up against anybody's poor. I mean, he was broke. And he went and did this fight, but he was going to get $4,000 to win this fight. And that $4,000 nothing to sniff at today, but at this time in Matt's life, I can't even express to you how much money $4,000 would have been. Well, Matt beats the guy up. The fight stopped. Great news, he's going to get paid. The opponent throws a fit and wants to restart the fight. Now, this is before there was a commission. So technically, if they wanted to restart it, they could. Matt, of course, would not want to restart the fight because he's now going to get paid $4,000, which is, again, all the money in the world. Matt says, I'm in. Let's go. Let's fight again. And he's in the ring. I've seen the tape like 5 times. And they actually restart the fight. So he risks the win. He risks advancing his career because, something could happen and he could end up losing the fight that he already won. And he risks the $4,000 just because he genuinely enjoys fighting. He genuinely enjoys competing. The opponent didn't think it should have been stopped. Matt says, well, let's do it again. Referee clears the ring and they restart and Matt beats the guy up again. But to him, that was just fun. That's just a good time to go out and compete like that. So, yeah, his mentality is different. I don't have it. I can't copy it. I can't quite identify what sets him apart. But he's definitely got a different mentality that's proved successful for him.
So basically, I'm just wrestling my ass off, adding some cross training into it, little karate, little boxing, just kind of stuff to add to this stuff. But my main skill is to get the guy on the ground, and hopefully, my punches next time are gonna be more powerful. But I'm a wrestler, and the wrestlers are the ones that are winning anyway, so it don't matter.
The sport today is known as mixed martial arts, or it's abbreviated to MMA. You'll hear that a lot. That's actually just a legal term. The legislature sat down when they decided to regulate this. It started in Nevada, the fight capital of the world. They decided to regulate it. They had to call it something. They defined it as mixed martial arts.
It's the fastest growing, hottest sport in the world.
Mixed martial arts is a combination of a bunch of combat disciplines.
You have pretty much any discipline you want.
Wrestling,
Thai boxing,
jiu-jitsu,
judo,
ground game,
kickboxing,
boxing,
karate,
to striking,
boxing,
to stand up,
taekwondo,
a little bit of jiu-jitsu,
wrestling,
kicking to the legs.
College wrestling, not pro wrestling, not the fake stuff.
There's no rules in terms of what you can bring into the ring. It's basically a combination and amalgamation of the Olympic combat sports.
Before it wasn't so much a sport. I consider it a sport now. I didn't really consider it a sport when it first started because it was a lot more brutal. Headbutts, stomping on someone's face. That's not so much a sport.
Because I almost got caught in submissions, I almost got knocked out. In the process of beating these guys up, I was like, this could be dangerous, and that's when there wasn't rules. That's when there was, you couldn't bite, you couldn't eye gouge, and you couldn't, you couldn't kick them in the balls. That you can attack their groins. So there was like these 3 rules, those are just kind of like general rules in life. Anyway, we should always, abide by. No biting. We tell our kindergartners that. No biting. Don't gouge their eyes, and certainly, all guys know that you don't attack somebody in the groin.
So mixed martial arts has grown so much in the last 5 years. They used to fight with no rounds, no time limits. So you have these guys fighting for an hour. And did I like it? Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a sport to me to love, but do I like it better now with the rules, the commissions? That's what you need to become a legitimate sport.
It's evolved really since that time, and I think you saw a big turning point at UFC, I believe it was 61, when Matt Hughes defeated Royce Gracie, because that was kind of like, okay, it's now official, the guard has changed, it's really a sport, mixed martial arts, and it's not dominated by somebody from a single sport.
My first fight was UFC Japan 29, and I went over there, and the guy shot a takedown on me. Not a good game plan for Mr. Anjo.
At UFC 31, he fought Ricardo Almeida against Phil Baroni.
Pat Miletich and fought Murillo Bustamante.
Ivan Salivary fight against Baroni again. Valenico Vitali. Obviously, every match was in order. Actually got Vitali to the ground and submitted him with strikes. When Terrell knocked him out was a big setback for Matt Lindland, and he did what a lot of fighters have to do. If you have a big loss in the UFC, you kind of head back down to the minor leagues. But Matt was cleaning everybody up in the minor leagues, and he was brought back into the UFC at UFC 52 against Travis Lutter.
And Matt walked through Travis Lutter pretty easy.
And he wasn't necessarily overpoweringly, dynamic, exciting, but he won every time.
I want to give a little bit of a political answer because you don't ever want to publicly insult the UFC, but the UFC has a good point, and that was, at the time, they didn't like the way Matt fought. I don't know that they're completely out on a limb on that. Matt didn't always have the most appealing fights.
Label that he got stuck with by Dana early on, always a boring fighter, doesn't hold.
And so sometimes people look at it as lay and pray. I just look at it as Matt being a smart fighter and he's looking for an opening.
A lot of people call it an ugly style.
Wrestling and fighting, it doesn't matter. The guy's going to work and work and work until he's the best, and he's right there, right now.
If he has to make it ugly and lay on top of the guy and just control him and not let him up, he's going to do that because he knows the bottom of the line is to win. And meanwhile, the fans are like, oh, well, he should stand up and throw punches. But, those people aren't getting Matt's paycheck, and Matt knows that you just got to win.
It's not about image, and it's not about marketing, and mixed martial arts isn't about any of that. It's about competition and proving you're the better man on that day.
At the press conference, UFC President Dana White said it for all the world to hear. He said, we are going to give Matt Lindland the next title shot.
Matt Lindland has been around for a long time. Matt Lindland's very mad at me. Very, very mad at me. And he feels that he should be in this title spot right now, and he has deserved it. He's been with us for a long time. There were a lot of reasons why we, obviously Rich Franklin and Evan Tanner deserve this shot too, but just to keep him from kicking my ass this evening, I will make it public right here that he will get the next shot at the title. Just to set the record straight, Dana, I'm not mad at you. And Goldberg, I'm not an angry guy. I heard your commentary. I'm just very passionate, okay? I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about this sport. I love it. I think all these guys here, everybody that fought tonight, put on an incredible show for you fans. I'm just incredibly excited to be a part of this, and I'm not an angry person, and I'm not mad at anybody. I'm just passionate, and I love what I do, and I love, knocking people's noggins around and getting in that octagon and just fighting people.
Jack Nelson's going to make his sport fight debut.
Yeah, its sport fight is tomorrow night at the Rose Garden, and are either you guys fighting tomorrow night?
No, we're promoting this.
Just
one.
promoting?
This is our baby. This is the one we promote, and all the local talent's coming out. We got guys from all over the West Coast, Washington, Idaho, California, up and down the coast. So,
well, I think our goal was, and maybe it was small-minded, I don't know, but we wanted to create a show that would showcase up-and-coming fighters. We didn't have the pockets or the desire to be a huge pay-per-view type show that's going to challenge the UFC or anything like that. That wasn't our goal and our intent.
Sport fight may not be the biggest thing, but are you comfortable with the idea that you guys are sort of basically setting yourself up to be like a minor league for the UFC? Is that like a cool thing?
That's what we wanted to do.
That's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, we wanted to get our guys exposure and get them moved into shows like the UFC and the IFL, and we got guys fighting in Pride and Bodog, and you name the show. We've had somebody that's fought in sport fight that's moved on to those shows.
We wanted to create a good quality show put on by fighters that treated fighters well and gave fighters experience so they could move on to the big shows and get matched up with the fighters that they should be matched up with, so they got a chance to win every fight, and unfortunately somebody wins and somebody loses, and especially at this level it's hard to match guys up and do it well, and Matt has done a particularly good job. I mean, you look at the amateur fights we had tonight, they were every bit as good as the pro fights, and that's not easy to do. So, that was our goal, and I think we've accomplished that.
This is a great opportunity for me to come down, see an event that Randy and Matt have been working on for a number of years and stuff like that. It's great to see these kind of grassroots promotions building up. People can see the upcoming Randy Coutures and Matt Lindlands of the world.
Sport fight was a great thing, and Matt started sport fight just to simply build up his guys, to enhance their career. And I think a lot of the guys need to know that's the only reason he started the show, was to help out his guys that he had training in his gym, because at the time in 03 there wasn't as many fights, there wasn't as many opportunities, and Matt seen it as a chance to showcase his guys' skills and put his name behind it. And doing that, SureDog and the big companies, they picked up his show and they looked at it, which helped his guys to get on the map. Ed Herman, myself, Chris Wilson, Matt Horwich, Ian Loveland, Chael Sonnen.
What Matt's got that other people don't have is he's got Angie, his wife, and Angie runs things. She gets everything done. I'm not saying Matt doesn't, but I think the backbone there is Angie. Matt's off there doing the things that he needs to do to train them and coach them and be there and do the business aspect of that. But Angie's really doing the hard work behind, doing all the nitty-gritty stuff.
The explosion of MMA basically comes down to what we all talked about for a long time, and that was TV.
Fans of what's called Ultimate Fighting will be happy about a new bill in the works.
UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship has put the sport of mixed martial arts on the map.
Mixed martial arts got a shot at the mainstream last night with a fight televised on primetime network TV.
Gaining more male viewers in a key demographic than even the baseball playoffs. What started as an underground combat community has made a splash in mainstream sports.
Ultimate Fighting. It's an extremely popular sport, a mix of different types of martial arts, and it's illegal here in the state of Tennessee.
Critics say it's just an excuse for beer-stoked crowds to indulge in blood.
I know I'm going to get emails saying it's clean, it's wonderful, it's this, it's that. On a visceral level, I'm not crazy about it.
People are watching, delivering huge ratings for Spike TV.
The key always was television.
The Ultimate Fighter on Spike Television
was The Ultimate Fighter.
And Spike TV came along, and in conjunction with Zuffa, they put on The Ultimate Fighter.
And The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 basically drove this sport higher than it's ever been.
And as a result, now you got guys that are making a living off it. They're essentially the equivalent of rock stars and major athletes. So it's been very interesting just as a fan to watch the sport progress.
A couple of years later, here we are, UFC is talking to HBO, ESPN, and then there's all these knockoffs or rival companies coming up that are creating their own mixed martial arts brands.
As time goes by, MMA is going to far surpass boxing because of that young audience it has right now.
I used to be a boxing fan way back in the day, until about the time that Mike Tyson switched over and Don King basically ruined him. And it's just never been the game for me anymore. And this kind of fills that void up, because I really like martial arts. I like people. I've always liked the idea of two guys going in there and going after it and shaking hands when it's all over.
When we look back on this thing 50 years from now, we're going to remember that that show is the real impetus for mixed martial arts growth in North America.
And it's really amazing how many people still think the UFC is the old days. I mean, I get questions all the time about, does that guy that wears his pajamas still fight and beat everyone up that's 3 times as big as him? And it's like, well, he still tries to fight a little bit, but basically no. And now it's a sport, and you have world-class athletes that are gold medalists in the Olympics and the best at what they do coming into this sport.
Well, some people are starting to talk about mixed martial arts as this overnight success, and yet as one of the guys in the grassroots, you know that it's nothing overnight about it. It's been hard work.
Yeah, mixed martial arts has been around for quite a while, and it's finally gaining some acceptability. It was a struggle to get some television exposure, and I think with the television exposure, they're seeing the numbers of people that are watching. It really hit that 18 to 34 demographic, and men, at that age, and especially a lot of younger people. They don't even realize that there's great boxers still out there. This is the combat sport now that people are watching.
I think there's multiple reasons why people like conflict and seeing somebody get beat. I think some people are just sick and twisted, and there's just something sadistic in them, just something evil and corrupt, to where watching somebody else get beat gives them joy in a perverse way. For the guy who understands the fight game a little better and has a little more appreciation for the technical aspect, he really appreciates the ground game. He knows that that's a far more complicated game. And so to the average fan, it looks perhaps more boring, but to the more informed fan, it's more pure form of the sport.
I think I like the stand-up, hand-on-hand, jiu-jitsu, kicking, and once they get on the ground, it's kind of, I feel bad for whoever's underneath, but when they break out, that makes it pretty good.
For the new fan or the moderate fan, it's all about the striking game.
What's your favorite part? The knockouts. Yeah. When they fall to the ground, it's like bam.
As a general rule, the hardcore fans like to see a technical fight.
Oh, I like a good tap out. I like a good submission hold. And where else can you see a dude who might be steeped in sumo wrestling fighting somebody who's jiu-jitsu or a boxer or something?
And it's weird too, man. When you're at a fight and somebody starts bleeding or they're cut, there are those fans who absolutely erupt, and in that way, it's not unlike the days of the gladiator games in the New Testament, or some of the wars in the Old Testament, where people come out just to see the possibility of death.
In these cage fights, what's your favorite thing to see?
Oh, probably blood.
I kept going through guys. I was tapping out jiu-jitsu black belts. I was beating the next guy that was supposed to be the next great thing, and I worked my way up there, and then all of a sudden, I'm not on the cards. I'm on undercards, or I'm not getting fights, and I'm begging, put me on the show. And then when I finally get on the show, I'm not even televised.
So they put him against Joe Dirksen, who is a Canadian Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and pretty well-rounded all around. A very durable fighter, but not necessarily an elite fighter. And Matt decisioned him.
There's plenty of guys out there to fight. I want to stay busy. I want to keep fighting, but I certainly think I deserve a shot at Rich Franklin, and I'd love to get in there and challenge him.
Would you be okay with fighting a prelim again? I mean, they don't seem to give you much pay-per-view time.
I'm never okay with fighting the prelim. Well, it kind of pisses me off that you put your number one contender on an undercard, but I'm still getting paid the same, so that's the name of the game, man. Get in there, make a paycheck, and have fun doing it. And then next thing you know, Monday morning after I fought Joe Dirksen, I get a call and say, we're going to release you from your contract. So, I didn't understand. And apparently I wore a sponsored T-shirt, a sporting book, a gambling sportsbook.com. I wore their shirt to the weigh-ins, a non-televised event.
Matt Lindland. Matt Lindland weighs in at at 185 1/2 pounds, the middleweight bout, the third bout of the evening.
Well, I mean, of course, I thought it was bullshit. I mean, I think the funny part is regardless of what he did, there was other fighters involved that did the exact same thing that, didn't get in trouble at all. And, I'm not sure why Dana doesn't like Matt. I mean, I would imagine it's because Matt's an extremely honest person. He doesn't candy coat anything, and I think that's one of the things his friends love the most about him, but also I know it's probably why a lot of people don't like him. I mean, he's very honest.
Well, I was kind of stuck in the middle because I have, because of the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, developed a very close relationship with Dana. And, Matt and I have been teammates for a long time. So the first person that gets called from both sides is me. Matt calls me because he's pissed off, and Dana calls me because he's pissed off, and I got to try and sort through it. At the same time, maintain my relationship with both entities as well. So it wasn't a very good place to be. And I could see both sides. I think, Matt, I think ultimately, on a personal level, I had to sit down and talk with Matt and say, look, you're bitching at Dana at every show instead of saying, hey, thanks for having me on the card. You're like, oh, thanks for putting me on the undercard, and complaining that you weren't on the pay-per-view. There's a lot of other fighters standing on every street corner out here that would give their left leg to be in your spot. You need to be appreciative and realize this guy holds all the cards. You don't have to kiss his butt. Matt's not going to do that to anybody, but at least be appreciative that you're still getting a chance to compete and make a living for your family and not be in his face all the time. And let your fighting speak for itself. I mean, his fighting has done that, undeniably. The one looking like the idiot right now is the UFC because they've got one of the best fighters in the world that they cut loose, and they haven't brought him in to fight their top guys. It looks stupid.
There was the controversy over allegedly he wore a sponsored shirt that he shouldn't have worn and things like that. There were other people that wore the same shirts that were not penalized in any way, shape, or form.
Remember, the UFC is in business to make money. And so if they think somebody's not going to make them money, then they do have the right to let that person move on or get rid of them.
Can you tell us the other fighters that were sponsored by Sportsbook at the time?
I believe Evan Tanner was at that time. Randy Couture was at that time. And I think that those were the only guys that were there at that time. I could be wrong. I mean, I could have missed one. Actually, I was working for the UFC at that time, to be honest.
There's also a function for that gambling website that he was, I think it was sportsbook.com, that that had Randy there. But Randy was never penalized for that. And so there was some issue. Well, why was Matt penalized and Randy wasn't? It's difficult to say.
And Matt did push the rules a little bit with representing the illegal gambling company and all that, wearing the T-shirt, and at the same time, it wasn't clearly stated. I mean, you could make a case either way. Both guys were wrong, both guys were right. So, and it put me in a tough spot, but it all works out in the end.
Tell me, what was your reaction when you found out that he was not going to fight in the UFC?
I have to be very politically correct because that's my boss. Well, when I found out that Matt wasn't going to be fighting in the UFC, I knew that somehow Matt would be okay. Other doors would open, other avenues would present themselves, and of course, when you have that much drive and that much determination, you're going to do okay for yourself, and that's what Matt's done.
Yeah, you don't want to cross Dana. He's an emotional guy. He really doesn't think with his mind, he thinks with his heart, and that heart gets pretty hard when you do cross him.
A fighter has never been released from the UFC for a piece of clothing. This was the first time this has ever happened, and fighters have been let go for a lot more severe circumstances. Steroids and drugs and inappropriate behavior in or out of the cage. So this was definitely a unique circumstance, and to a lot of people, they thought it was frivolous.
with a person like Dana White, you don't want to get into a fight with him. You know, it's just like getting in a fight with your boss at work. It's not a good battle. It's not a battle you're going to win. And you could take probably the worst boss you've ever worked for, and Dana White's 10 times worse.
I think they just wanted him out of the way because they were going to he was going to continue to beat the guys that they wanted, and on a personal level. And they used the sportsbook online betting as part of a reasoning behind to let him go.
I do a mailbag every Tuesday, and we had a guest mailbag by Dana where I had readers email questions for Dana, and one of the questions was, why did you fire Matt Lindland and why won't you bring him back? And he said, I did not fire Matt Lindland, blah, 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 but he refused to say I would bring him back, right?
I think there was some other things behind that decision. I don't think it hurt anyone's feelings that he wore this small T-shirt that was seen by literally, just a number of hundreds of people, maybe 300, 400, maybe 500 people.
As a fighter, you want this to be an honest business. You want it to be a legitimate sport where men can strive to be the best fighters of the world without having to kiss ass to a president, without having to, give in your rights and know that you are your own man within the promotion.
I run into people locally, and they hear what I do, and they're like, "Oh, you coach at Team Quest," and they'll be like, "Oh, I got a friend who's a UFC fighter." They'll be like, "Oh, really? Well, who is that?" And they're like, "Oh, well, it's so and so." And I'm like, "Oh, well, when did he fight?" They're like, "Oh, he just fought last weekend in the local amateur show." Now, granted, if we see how this got put together, they said UFC fighter. What they meant to say was MMA fighter. But it's like if you get sick and you need to grab something to blow your nose with, do you grab a tissue or do you grab a Kleenex? And the UFC is branded so well, and people are know it so much more than any other fighting brand, that I think him not being in that show when he's that caliber of fighter, he needs to be in that show. I think they need him to be in there, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it leaves a cloud if he doesn't make it back in there. I don't think it stops his career. I don't think it stops him from being successful. I think there's ways around it, but I definitely don't think it allows it to reach the same height as if he got back in the UFC and got to fight for the title.
Do you feel his career was cut short in the UFC?
Oh, of course. I mean, Matt Lindland should be fighting in the UFC right now. But I say that not really knowing Matt's financials. If Matt could go to these other organizations and care for his family and live the way he wants to live, I don't blame him a bit. That's probably the right choice. But as for Matt as a fighter, and Matt to fight the best in the world, he should be in the UFC, and he should be fighting the Rich Franklins and the Anderson Silvas and stuff like that, because us that know Matt know that he can probably beat those two guys, on any given night, and those guys could beat him possibly on any given night, but we're all, as fans, cheated of those fights just because of, the ordeal of him not being in the UFC.
I don't know why the UFC didn't find me as marketable as maybe I'm not marketable. Maybe I'm just, good at what I do, and that's, that's good enough. And that's really all I ever wanted to be, was good at what I do. And, if that sells, then that's great. And if it doesn't, I should probably find something else to do. But I like fighting, and I'm good at it, so I want to keep doing it for a while.
My guess is he's never had any enhancement type of drugs in his body ever.
He's not muscular per se. I mean, he's in very good shape.
Does he have the look, and I think that was a piece of it. I think they thought, man, this guy's probably going to win the championship, and I don't know if he has the look that we're looking for. And I think that's one spot that the UFC messed up, because I think if you win fights and you keep winning and you keep getting better, which Matt has done over and over, I think the fans are going to like you.
So he doesn't have a physique.
He does not look like what you would think of as a professional athlete, a world-class professional athlete.
Got those ears, protruding ears.
His ears are unbelievable. I asked him if he could actually feel anything or hear anything out of them. Wrestlers have the craziest looking ears. It's like a badge of honor, but I can't imagine any wife nibbling on those.
And the balding head.
Is he an attractive guy? No.
I'm not saying he's ugly or anything like that.
He's not the guy that goes and tans up and shaves his chest.
He's not what you want your fighter to look like.
He's not going to be that guy who shows up and look like he walked out of a GQ ad like Rich Franklin.
Any interview, he wears thermal shirts. You know, he's from the Northwest.
He's just a all-around redneck.
He's got chew in his upper lip.
He's got tobacco in his teeth.
From the chew.
He's always got to chew in, and
I think he never brushed his teeth.
You know, has a farmer tan because he does work on his farm.
Coming off the farm.
He works, he lives on a ranch. You know, he works, so he's digging fence holes or doing something.
Seems to like wearing boots and working on his farm and kissing his wife, raising his kids, and sending guys to the hospital.
And he'll come from working on the ranch straight to practice. I'm like, Matt, do you take a shower? What the hell? You know, nobody wants to grapple with you when you smell like that. Give me a break.
You know, he's a hillbilly from the sticks that shows up and beats people up.
But if you look back at the early years of Team Quest now and what they've accomplished, and just think of all these guys in a little gym in Oregon, you know, Dan Henderson, Randy Couture, Matt Lindland, and it's like all these guys were training at the same place, and it's like, you know, that's pretty incredible. And you know, and to this day, you know, and they still continue to bring up these young kids, you know, Ryan Schultz, Matt Horowitz, and you know, it's just amazing how these gyms are, and how Team Quest evolved, and how all those three main fighters evolved. You know, Henderson having the 2 belts, and you know, Matt being possibly the number 1 185-pound fighter in the world, and you know, now everybody knows about Randy. And yeah, back then it was kind of funny because nobody really thought anything special of it, but when you look back now and when books start coming out and stuff like that, there's definitely going to be a whole section about Team Quest back in the day and how great these guys were and what they did in the sport.
The early days of Team Quest were pivotal for the sport because we had so few teams where guys could go and really learn the craft and make this a full-time endeavor. At the time, Militich Fighting Systems, Militich Martial Arts out in Iowa was really the big school, but we knew we would need more schools throughout the country. Not everyone was going to go to Iowa and do that type of fighting.
So we all kind of trained together, and it was nice. It was nice when Randy would come up, you know, and make, you know, that 2.5-hour trek with, you know, with Matt and with Henderson, and it was like, wow, man, we're going to get to train with those guys. We're going to roll with these guys. Never mind also that Matt is a legend in Greco, in American USA wrestling. I mean, a lot of us, I mean, we all come from wrestling background. That's America's martial arts. And he was a god, man, really. I mean, you look at him, it's like, wow, man, this guy got silver medal. That's a huge accomplishment for guys that have gone through wrestling programs. Huge. It's a dream that people, you know, think about having. And you know, we were training with him, we were rolling with him, we were sweating with him. It was great. It was wonderful.
Matt Lindland is a wrestler, therefore this is not like walking for him. Nope. Make your punches shorter. Too close, Randy. Okay, now that's not bad. Make it faster, but not harder. Go back, give it back, Evan. Ivan. Boom.
In MMA, probably like in boxing, there are athletes, and then there are athletes who are killers. Okay? Matt Lindland is an athlete who, when the bell rings, is a killer. And I think that Matt Lindland brings a aspect of fighting that you don't get from your average college wrestler. You know, Matt to me is a throwback to the old days when fighters in the 20s and the 30s like Jack Dempsey and Henry Armstrong and Harry Greb used to ride boxcars from fight to fight and, you know, eat beans out of cans, okay? Matt Lindland is one of the people who could have survived in that era. Matt Lindland could have went through the Depression, and he could have fought and held his own with any of those people from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. In a bar fight, Matt Lindland would kick Muhammad Ali's ass. In a bar fight, he'd have whipped Marvin Hagler or Jack Dempsey, because those guys were boxers. See, Matt Lindland has what I call the it factor. Like Mike Tyson had the it factor, Roberto Duran had the it factor, Matt Lindland has the it factor. But Roberto Duran could only punch you. You know, Mike Tyson could only punch you. Matt Lindland can punch you, he can kick you, he can choke you, he can maim you any way that his imagination lets him go forth and do. And believe me, Matt Lindland is got an imagination when it comes to mayhem.
Since Matt Lindland has left the UFC, he's really strung together a lot of excellent, highly competitive fights.
Yeah, Matt's fight with Rampage was possibly one of the best fights I've seen.
Matt was going up to 205 pounds. He usually fights at 185 pounds.
And Rampage cuts weight to get to 205, and it just seemed to be an unfair size and strength differential.
Matt came into that fight, everybody's saying he was going to get killed.
It was a very close fight, and at the end of the fight, I even told Quentin Jackson this because he asked me, who do you think won this fight? And I said, God, I would really have to lean towards Matt Lindland.
I worked the fights for the WFA when Matt fought Quentin Jackson, and I have to tell you, that was probably one of the first times I ever went back to an athlete's dressing room and told them how sorry I was that their hand was not the one that was raised that night.
It could have gone either way. One of the judges did think Matt won the fight. You know, it was a split decision loss.
Even though the judges didn't see that, he beat him. Quentin Jackson would tell you the same thing and has told people.
I think with more promotions coming in and Matt Lindland getting the chance to go to the WFA and fight one of the best fights I've ever seen, regardless of it being in the UFC Octagon or the Pride Ring or anywhere, it was one of the best fights out there. That's how Matt Lindland started to really make a name for himself, is that he was willing to go out there and just fight whatever opponent at whatever weight, if he had to fight up, which he did a couple times, and produce great fights for the sport.
There was as many people who thought Lindland won as Rampage.
This is SportsCenter.
Quentin Rampage Jackson did not let it last long with his first round knockout of Chuck Liddell, one of UFC's biggest stars. Last night in Las Vegas in UFC 71, Liddell went down. Jackson takes the light heavyweight championship, and it's time now to talk about it with president of UFC, Dana White.
Last I checked, I had 4 pounds to go. So I like cutting. It gives me a reason to get around to fasting like they did in the Bible before they went out to battle. Now all we need is a drum circle and some incense, and got the sauna.
The IFL is a great organization for this sport, because they're putting money into it. They're bringing a lot of fighters. They're going to have, when the actual season starts, I think we started out with 4 teams. They went to 8 teams.
And so it's just like a professional sports league. They get paid salary. The coach determines the roster, and then the league, whether it's NFL or NBA, IFL, determines the season.
Matt Lindland's contribution to the sport was that he had the bravery to go out and try new things when Zuffa and the UFC let him go. He was willing to go out there and align himself with the IFL, which the UFC didn't like. They didn't like that promotion. They didn't want that promotion to get off the ground from the start. And they were very active to try and make sure that happened.
Well, I know a lot of things that happened at the beginning I'd rather not get into, because I was with the UFC, and I have a lot of respect for that situation. I'd rather not, if that's okay. Dana White and I used to be very good friends. I could share some wonderful things with Dana White. Dana White is not the same guy that I knew back then. And a lot of things changed. What he's done to the IFL, people can come to their conclusions for themselves. If they know, the sport, they know Dana, they can come to conclusions for themselves. I'd rather not get into that at this time.
Actually, the first IFL that I really saw it taking hold was when I went to the IFL in Oregon, and Matt coaching his team. And when his team came out and everyone stood up and clapped and was going crazy, that was a sport. That's like going to a Dodger game when the Dodgers taking the field and everybody stands up and gets excited.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Portland Wolfpack!
Move him! Move him, make him carry your weight! You okay? You alright? Good. In and out, cat and mouse, cut your angles. Beautiful job, buddy! Oh, awesome game plan. Stuck to it, you did awesome. I'll see you up there, bro. Hit him hard on the ground. Knee to the body! Take him down! Make him choke!
You feel really alive after you get in there and compete.
Reset, Aaron. Where are we going? Yeah, he was looking for the choke, but he crushed his ribs, I think.
All right, so the guy's like neck is doing that.
He's one of the strongest guys that I ever grabbed a hold of.
Really?
I'm not really sure what it was, except for the gorilla grip.
Gorilla grip, all right.
He just squeezed him.
I'm here with Matt Lindland, the coach of the Portland Wolfpack, who are victorious tonight. You seem really excited, Matt.
I am. I'm really excited for these guys. We're in the finals. We got a lot of work to do to get ready for the finals, and we're all excited to be there. We're excited for the win, of course.
The leader of the pack himself enters the ring.
I look them right in the eye. I want them to know that I'm coming. I want them to feel me there.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is Jeremy Horn!
5 feet 9 inches tall and 185 pounds. He is the coach of the Dragons, Carlos the Ronin Newton.
His opponent tonight, he is a 5-time national champion,
Widely regarded as the #1 middleweight in the world.
3-time Pan American champion, World Cup champion,
and known as a fighter who will never back down from any opponent in any weight class.
Here is Matt the Law Lindland.
Horn in the blue.
Matt Lindland gets a take to fight.
Round 1 is underway in this super fight. It is scheduled for 5 4-minute rounds. The way he saw this fight coming in. There's the knee, and Newton avoids that sweeping left hook, and now Newton.
He pulls guard.
Trying to put this away early.
Lindland is teeing off on Carlos Newton. This fight could be near being over.
He's had that many fights. Only the age of 31. Oh!
Big right hand by Lindland.
The wrestler delivers the punch, and it's over. Lindland's won it. Woo! Thomas Lindland is getting under the He taps out. He taps. Matt Lindland ends it here in the second round.
Matt Lindland submits the jiu-jitsu man with a guillotine from the mount. Man, that was dramatic.
Matt Lindland stops the fight. He knocks out Jeremy Horn.
He mount unbelievable.
Matt Lindland has defeated Carlos Newton.
Matt the Law Lindland.
Your winner, Matt the Law Lindland.
I was one of the first to hear that Matt Lindland was going to fight Fedor, and I had a hard time believing it.
outweighed by 40,
50 pounds, is a big difference.
That's a bad fight for Matt. Honestly, I thought he was nuts.
Boy, we're in over our head on this one.
Matt Lindland is a rogue fighter. Kind of just does what he wants.
There's not many heavyweights that want to fight Fedor.
Matt should really not be in the same ring as Fedor.
He's supposed to be the toughest fighter ever in the sport, and we'll see. That's what my job is, to go over there and prove them wrong and show that I'm the best in this sport.
If Lindland can win tonight, it would be a huge, huge upset.
Introducing American sensation, Mr. Matt Lindland.
Hi, I'm Matt Lindland. I'm from Team Quest Gym in Oregon. I want to let you know I'm the #1 middleweight in the world. I'm moving up 2 weight classes to take on the best fighter in the world. I want to thank Bodog and my opponent Fedor for this opportunity. And I promise to put on a great show tomorrow night.
This is a question for all of the fighters, actually. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? When you were small, were you a fan of some kind of sport? Or do you have, like, any things that you really liked when you were small? Just like a short, maybe couple sentences.
Yeah, as a child, I didn't do sports. I wanted to grow up and be a cowboy. Cowboy.
Когда я была маленьким, я не любила никакой спорт, я хотела быть ковбоем.
Again, tomorrow night, the fight kicks off at the Ice Palace. The show is sold out. Doors are at 5:30. First fight kicks off at 6 p.m. 13 big action-packed fights, along with 3 super fights.
Number one rule I have, though, but what we say goes. If you don't like it or we have a problem, we'll take a point away. Or we'll disqualify you and it'll be done. I don't care if it's pay-per-view, main event, or what it is. That's the way it's going to be. Obvious no-nos. No unsportsmanlike conduct. No headbutting. No biting. No hair pulling. No groin shots. Do not grab the ropes or the opponent's glove. No grabbing the ropes, okay? This, we'll consider grabbing the rope. You cannot rest your arms on top through here, okay?
Introducing one of the best fighters in the world, Matt Lindland.
Because there is not a competitive architecture in place, you've got to go the other route, and that's the political route. You've got to do the things right just to be given those opportunities. Whereas in wrestling, where Matt grew up and was trained, you didn't have to do that. People didn't have to like you. If you win this tournament, you will go to the Olympics. If you win the Olympics, you are the Olympic champion. That simple. It doesn't work that way in MMA.
Entering the ring at this time, the one and only Fedor Emelianenko.
I'm sure she probably gets a little nervous when, she hears all the talk about how good this guy is and how he's unbeatable and he's gonna break me in a million pieces and all that. But I got plans to, break him in some pieces.
This is a heavyweight battle, a main event of the night. Fedor Emelianenko, decked out in his black trunks. They're the short ones. Matt Lindland also in black, with a little gold trim on his, a little bit longer. We're set to go. This should be something. Watch how fast Emelianenko will try to start.
History is being made in the Bodog fight ring tonight, and Matt Lindland is showing no hesitation in making it. Charging forward and looking for that Greco clinch right away. He's already opened up a huge cut over the left and right arms of Fedor Emelianenko.
But on the inside, he wants to keep him close. He doesn't want to take the power. Going for leg sweeps at both guys. Picks him up, does that. He wants to drive him down, and he does.
Fedor reverses the Olympic medalist in Greco with a beautiful you something right now. Fedor has got to try to finish this fight because that could very well be a fight stopper.
Matt wants to be down here. Great
for an Achilles lock. Oh, wow. Falling to his belly, cranking on that ankle.
Lyndon blasts him with the heel leg in there.
Possibly looking for a toe, but they're going back to the arm again. Oh, it's a elbow. Fedor bleeding, hurt, but still gets the armbar victory in the early seconds of the first round. Still undefeated, still the man is Fedor Emelianenko.
Absolutely astonishing. Emelianenko gets blasted early in the opening.
Matt, I know you're down. Obviously, I'd ask you, how you feel, what you thought about the fight. Usually you're on the winning end of the stick. What's going through your mind right now?
Well, obviously he's a great fighter, and it was an honor to be in here and fight him. The thing is, I didn't have a rope to help aid me out of getting out of that arm bar like he did the takedown, and I'd love to get in here and fight him again.
All right, so I saw you were going for, obviously Greco-Roman is your strong suit. Went for a big throw. He latched onto the ropes a couple of times. Did that change the pace of the fight?
Well, definitely stopped the takedown and pulled him on top of me instead of vice versa. So, yes.
All right, is your arm okay? I noticed you immediately grabbed your arm at the elbow.
Well, it cracked and snapped open, popped, and we'll see. I don't know. I've never had that happen, so we'll see how it feels.
Are you coming back to Bodog?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm coming back to Bodog. I'm going to beat somebody up because I'm a little embarrassed.
All right, Matt. Thank you very much. Back to you, Colonel.
I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, fuck, I came all over to Russia. Fucking got caught in an armbar. I don't know. It's hard to think right now because I'm just disappointed in the way the fight went. That's all. Felt like, felt good in there. Felt like I could compete with him. No problem. It's, I don't know, just disappointed. I was hoping that would go a little different. I'm certainly looking that way, and he did a fantastic job. He's good. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just disappointing. That's all.
He's a fucking legend, man. Unbelievable. And the thing is,
here's a jump.
The jump.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks.
I love the fact that it was a submission move. Because that was actually that's his game. He beat him at his own game. Okay. Honestly, I don't really know that much about UFC's politics. And they've done an excellent job at promoting mixed martial arts over the years, and so from that perspective, I'm a fan of theirs. I actually watch their stuff, so why they let them go, I have no idea.
One reporter asks him, "Mr. Lindland, what do you do now that you lost to Fedor, but you were still the #1 rated middleweight in the world? Where do you go from here?" Matt thought for a moment, a metaphor for his life, and he said, "Well, I'm putting in a fence back home, so I'm going to go home and dig some post holes."
Well, tonight's Sports Final Spotlight, taking the fight to the state capitol. Eagle Creek's Matt Lindland has a world-famous resume in wrestling and mixed martial arts. But more than that, Lindland says he's a regular guy concerned about his home state. And that's why a man known for his role as a UFC fighter is now running for a spot in the Oregon State Legislature. It's hard to question his work ethic.
How much?
20. Olympic silver medalist, 20 wins and 5 losses in mixed martial arts. And now, an aspiring politician. Clearly, it's not your everyday scenario. Lindland has spent a good deal of his life pounding people in the ring. But when the District 52 incumbent decided not to seek re-election, the battlefield simply shifted.
It's just another fight, is all it is. I mean, you're fighting for, you know, what you believe in. You're fighting for your values. Frankly, I think our state's going in the wrong direction right now. Just like what I do, it's no different. I'm an expert in what I do. I think I could be an expert in this because nobody's good at this. I don't think everybody I've seen, nobody has any common sense.
I was happy when I heard Matt was running. You know, you can never have too many friends that are politicians. So. On top of that, Matt's a winner. He wins everything that he enters. You know, the modern rules don't apply to him. He just finds a way to get good, successful things done that you would normally count him out for. So I like that. I like that when I heard he was running, a lot of people thought he didn't have a shot, and that always makes it exciting to watch him prove them wrong.
He's known, worldwide in the United States, but in order to win in a population sector of a small communities in Sandy and Hood River, that's going to be a challenge for us.
It was very nice to have all my fighters show up, and yes, I probably could have beat them up if they didn't, but they came out here and showed up and supported. It's good. You know, I feel good when guys come out like that and say, this is. We respect Matt and what he's done for us, and we're going to come out and support him because, this stuff isn't always fun. There's not too many of my guys are politically active. Maybe Chael and the rest of them are kind of just supporting me, really, and so that's an honor.
I like baseball, football, love basketball, but cage fighting, that's not my thing. My opponent gets paid hundreds of thousands for his brutal fights. But I know a little something about the Ultimate Fights, too. For me, the Ultimate Fight was raising 2 teenage sons alone, or running a large Head Start program to give a better start to thousands of kids. I'll leave the headbutting to my opponent, and I'll stay focused on the fights that really matter for our families.
Had he done everything that he could have done, including winning all the fights and not sort of putting his foot down, when it came to issues in terms of, my contract allows for this, it doesn't allow for this sort of stuff, I think it would have been undeniable, and the UFC couldn't have had an excuse to get rid of him and cut him. But he made it easy for them to cut him by doing the things that he did. And it's easy to lay blame on them for that and say that they weren't right by releasing Lindland, and they weren't. But he gave him an opportunity to do that through his actions, and I think there's this perception, and Matt's talked a lot about it. Is the reason that he hasn't fought Franklin or never fought Franklin was because Rich was their poster boy. They didn't want to have Matt be the champion for whatever reason he perceives, and I think there's something to that, but in a large way because who he is, and I don't think he should have been penalized for who he is, but in the end he was.
You want to know who the best wrestler in the world is? Go watch the Olympic Games. Everybody with a heartbeat is welcome to compete. They will have a process, a competitive architecture where it constantly gets broken down until there is one man standing on the entire planet. The UFC doesn't work that way. There's no rules to get into the UFC. You could be a great fighter and never even get a UFC contract. You can be the best fighter in the UFC and you don't have enough draw power to get on the main card. You could be on the main card and you don't have enough fans behind you to get you into the main event. That's the business side of it. That's not the fault of the UFC, and a lot of people don't understand that. They fault the UFC for that.
But when Dana first came onto the scene, he definitely cared. He cared about the athletes, and the successes that the UFC have now are pretty much based on Dana White. And the athletes, of course, because without the athletes you don't have anything. But he's really made a difference in our sport.
What the UFC's done, you hear controversy. Is it good that they're so big and they don't want competition? Obviously they want to make all the money, and that's what most businesses do, right? Is that good for the sport? Is it bad for the sport? I think you can't argue that what Dana's done for this sport has been nothing short of phenomenal. Getting it on TV, the ratings, the popularity, and how much it's grown since they took over has helped spawn all kinds of other shows, has made a venue for fighters. When I started in this, I knew every fighter there was. There was only 10 fighters around. I mean, there was, you know what I mean? It was such a small sport.
What you see is what you get, and that's the end of the story with Matt. He's a very sincere person. That's the upside. The downside is the sport's political, and he's got to play the game a little better.
Dana approaches everybody the same way, and he's completely ambitious. It's what's driven him, and I think driven Zuffa and the UFC to where they are. I mean, I think he's the driving force behind that company. The Fertittas purchased it, and he's a minor partner in that, but he's really the major impetus for the reason why there's been such a push behind the UFC in North America.
We don't really know who the best is. Who's best is whoever Dana White says is the best. I would like for Dana White to say Matt Lindland's the best.
I couldn't imagine David Stern, who's the head of the NBA, talking like Dana White in an interview. But this is Dana, who fancies himself the head of a major sports organization, just dropping F-bombs and any other kind of curse words you want, simply because that's him.
He should wear a suit, clean up his language, and act like a businessman, not like a thug. And that's what truly I think that is coming out, is that people are realizing that the UFC right now has gangster mentality, that they really would like to control everything and anything possible that means MMA.
It kind of makes me wonder about the Fertitta brothers, because they're somebody in Vegas. Their money, they're businessmen. And for them to let Dana do some of the things he does, it just makes me scratch my head sometimes.
If the best aren't fighting the best, I don't understand what we're doing with this thing. It's not really a sport until that happens.
I have to give it to Dana. I mean, look at where the UFC is. If Dana was running my ship right now, and I was cashing in on the things that he's doing right now on pay-per-view and stuff like that, maybe I wouldn't care what he said either. I don't know.
Well, I think Dana said it, when I went out there to try out to see if I was interested in doing his game show. They had a comeback one, and he said, he didn't want to give me a contract. He's the one to make all these promises and didn't want to put it in writing. And he told me, I'll make you a millionaire. I just figured. I said, well, I'm sure I'll make $1 million. At some point in my career, Dana. I don't need you to. If this is really the best thing for me, then let's just put it. Let's just get a contract and put it together. And he just was adamant. You'll be one of my boys if you do this. I was like, I don't want to be one of your boys. I want to be my own man. If this is the right thing for me, then we'll just write it all down and we'll put it in paper and we'll have an agreement. But Dana doesn't necessarily like to do business like that, so that it makes it hard. I think at this point in my career, I got to be very particular on who I deal with and sign contracts. This is a business.
It all comes, bottom line about everything in life is taking care of your family. And if Matt could take care of his family fine and not have to sell out to anyone, I wouldn't tell him to change anything.
We take this thing around the country, we break every arena record there is.
Dana White and his partners have taken basically a $2 million investment and turned it into a $1 billion asset.
We're the best-selling sports franchise on DVD. These guys are some of the best athletes in the world. These guys are incredible human beings and amazing athletes, and this does belong on television.
All rise for Dana.
For Dana White, who is the president of UFC.
The president of UFC, Dana White.
Have you ever heard of Matt Hughes?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of Matt Lindland?
No.
Have you ever heard of Randy Couture?
Absolutely.
Have you heard of Chuck Liddell?
Absolutely.
Have you heard of Matt Lindland?
Not Matt, no.
Okay.
But Matt Hughes.
Have you ever heard of Matt Lindland?
Matt who?
Lindland.
No, I haven't. Is he one of the new up-and-comers?
Rampage Jackson.
I've heard of Rampage Jackson.
Matt Lindland.
Maybe.
Yeah, you know, I think if Matt were to retire today, his MMA career would somehow end, you know, it would be kind of disappointing because here was a guy in the UFC, and he was a peer of Dan Henderson, he was a peer of Randy Couture. They both got to the top. Randy won the light heavyweight and the heavyweight title. Dan Henderson had the middleweight and light heavyweight titles in Pride and UFC. And both of those guys who were peers of Matt got the chance, got the big fights, and got to prove themselves on that stage. And Matt has not gotten that. For whatever reason, why that split became between him and the UFC, he didn't get that fight. And if he were to end, it would really be a shame because you want to see he's one of the pioneers of the sport in the early days and the growth of MMA, and you'd like to see those guys get a chance to prove themselves, and he really hasn't had that opportunity.